International alarm is growing after the Nova Kakhovka dam was destroyed in southern Ukraine. Officials say about 42,000 people are at immediate risk from that flooding. Water has engulfed homes, streets and farmland in dozens of communities. And there are also concerns that the collapse of agriculture in the region could have a worldwide impact. Mass evacuations from flooded Kherson continue. In the meantime, many residents had to spend the night on their roofs or in trees as they waited to be rescued. Elevated water levels are forecast to persist in the region for up to 10 days. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has warned that hundreds of thousands of people have been left without drinking water as a result of the disaster. The reservoir has now also been contaminated with 150 tons of industrial lubricant. After downplaying the situation yesterday, Russian-controlled Kherson is now under a state of emergency. Moscow has reported at least 7 people missing in the city of Nova Kakhovka. Authorities also sounded the alarm on potential contamination after a cemetery was flooded. For more on the situation on the ground, we're joined by Stuart Smith. He is live for us in Moscow. Stuart, it's a critical situation. There are tens of thousands of people. They need to be evacuated from Kherson. How are authorities actually managing this disaster right now? Do they have the manpower and the resources to help those in need?
Yeah, if we start in the region of Kherson, which is currently under the control of the Russian armed forces, they say that they have the resources they need, but there are still more people needing rescue. There are around 100 people still trapped closest to where the dam burst. That area is completely underwater, as well as 4 other towns nearby. So to access these people, they either need to be airlifted or they need to use watercraft, which authorities say are on their way as of Wednesday morning in Moscow, a few hours ago, on their way to help residents. In terms of temporary accommodation, authorities there say that they have plenty of room to put people, that they have space enough for a few thousand residents, but so far only around 300 have required assistance with accommodation as they go to visit friends or relatives. In terms of the impact of this, we've heard that there are 7 potential missing people, but no confirmed deaths or injuries yet. One explanation for that was given by a local official, that because this dam burst over the course of 5 hours, despite there being a huge amount of water, at least it wasn't in one big deluge, which has allowed people to move away from the ever-increasing floodwaters without being caught up, apart from potentially some shepherds who lived on the islands in the middle of the river. Those are the 7 missing people. But the impacts, as well as that, are major. There's problems with the agricultural water supply. 94% of the irrigation systems in Kherson, Ukraine says, will no longer be operational. There's problems with disease and drinking water. Residents have been issued with purification tablets in order for them to keep having access to water. But complicating all of this is the fact Ukrainian armed forces can only support north of the river. The Russian forces can only support those south. So it's making things more difficult. And there are also reports of shelling at the same time.
Right. Stuart, amid all of that impact, both Russia and Ukraine, they're trading blame about this destruction. Does Moscow have any credible evidence at all of what happened?
Well, the closest we've heard from Moscow, which alleges to evidence that we've heard from Moscow, is a newspaper article where the southern commander of the Ukrainian armed forces suggested they had attempted strikes on this dam last year in order to see if it would be possible to flood the river, in order to prevent a Russian attack across that river if it should be necessary. That was the most the Russian permanent representative had to present at the United Nations Security Council late in New York on Tuesday. In terms of other evidence, there isn't any, but similarly, Ukraine hasn't provided evidence for its allegation that Russia blew up the dam. The United Nations, too, is not saying anything about its conclusions. It says it doesn't have access to independent evidence. And so far, the other members of the United Nations Security Council, the UK, France, they have not, and the United States, they have also not suggested that Russia is to blame. They're calling for an investigation. So little clarity when it comes to evidence on this one.
Stuart, thank you very much for that. Stuart Smith there in Moscow.